is the cost of lies.
It's not that we'll mistake them for the truth. The real danger is that if we hear enough lies, then we no longer recognize the truth at all. What can we do then? What else is left but to abandon even the hope of truth and content ourselves instead with stories? In these stories, it doesn't matter who the heroes are. All we want to know is who is to blame.
This iconic piece of dialogue from the HBO series Chernobyl was apparently taken from the suicide tape of Soviet nuclear physicist Valery Legasov. I've quoted this before, but in what is now a catalogue spanning 3 years, it's not worth your time or mine to labour the nuances of its application herein. The point remains simple, that as Legasov also says, every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. In the context of Chernobyl, this profound maxim is used to illustrate the rot which permeated the Soviet system, and moreover, the ideology of Marxism and communism itself. And dramatised though it is, and not entirely accurate in places, I do recommend watching this series if you've not already done so. Having analysed it against a written, long-form and exacting historical account of the debacle in the USSR in 1986, I say it stands up to historical scrutiny and gives a sturdy account of the culture of lies that led to the world's worst nuclear disaster. I've spoken extensively about the pervasion of Marxist thinking into our so-called capitalist Western system, and so shall not rehash my multitude videos which you are free to peruse at your will. And I've come to believe, and indeed witness, how the Soviet-style lie is now permeating not only our culture and day-to-day dealings, but indeed the very edifice of capitalism itself, the corporation. Let me first give you a personal anecdote before briefly discussing the broader subject. At the place where I work, a large publicly listed company, we have recently completed work on our new website. I use the word completed entirely ironically here, as the project was bungled, mismanaged and under-resourced from the start, and the finished site does not even meet minimum viable product criteria, let alone the masterful, gleaming achievement that the project's ostensible owners are touting. Put simply, the site looks like crap, barely functions, and is underpinned by such a shonky CMS that even our sharpest tech guys are having trouble fixing the back-end bugs. I won't bore you with further details. Suffice to say that my role in all this was to write the website copy. For this project, I was given no formal brief, no style guide, zero project management or official oversight, and barely 2 weeks to complete the work. 2 weeks to write an entirely new corporate website from scratch, on top of all my other BAU. Basically, I'm going to need those TPS reports ASAP. So if you could just go ahead and do that, that'd be great. I'm not here to complain about my workload. We all have things to do, and most of the time they suck. The point is to help illustrate the ad hoc, almost schizophrenic nature with which so many large organisations now operate, and not only in the bloated taxpayer-funded sector, but private business as well. It strikes me, even from my own limited decades in the workforce, that the type of headless chicken project management I've just described was once only the realm of the public sector, sprawling bureaucratic octopuses where committees are formed to discuss the formation of yet more committees. I spent several years working for a large university, and this was the standard operating procedure. This is part of the reason I went back over to the private sector. I believed naively at the time that I would no longer have to endure this type of inefficient buggery. Little did I know, the Soviet, literally translating from Russian to English as governing council, style of management, which has long infected our public institutions in the West, had since seeped into the formerly lean, mean and results-orientated corporate world also. Here again we see Klaus Schwab's and Larry Fink's public-private partnership, the ethos that underpins Agenda 2030 and the fabled Great Reset. Capitalism is no longer about the free exchange of labour in a largely unregulated market, so to obtain the best possible outcome for both purveyor and consumer. Indeed, capitalism no longer exists. It has, as I frequently commented, been supplanted by stakeholder capitalism, a system of globalist kleptocracy, wherein efficiency and results are secondary to ideology, and, as we know, ideology demands compliance, and compliance demands unanimity. This brings me back to our new website. In the gigantic ESG beholden corporation of today, I have increasingly experienced the same creeping pervasion of happy-clappy groupthink which I thought I'd escaped when I got out of the semi-public sector mire of the modern university administration. A fervent zealotry entirely reminiscent of the Soviet rot depicted in Chernobyl. More important than calling out problems or identifying risks in today's corporation appears to be a collective fervour in which nothing can ever have gone wrong, in which all is well, in which the powers that be are infallible, and indeed in which he who does name the problem and dares to speak out runs the risk of becoming a pariah. Before the launch of our entirely dysfunctional and hideous new website, a conglomeration of stakeholders, including myself, were invited to a meeting with the project managers, such as they claim to be, and the external vendor. This 90-minute waste of everyone's time commenced with a half-hour backslapping session wherein our newly recruited change officers effusively bloviated about the immense success of the project. It was surreal. Virtually identical to the scene from Chernobyl where Legasov meets with the Politburo for the first time and sits there, aghast, as various high-placed apparatchiks assure General Secretary Gorbachev that the situation at the nuclear power plant is well in hand and that radioactive contamination is minimal. I sat through this bizarre reverse struggle session in utter disbelief, as people nodded and smiled and blew increasingly radiant shafts of sunshine up one another's buttholes until it finally came time for feedback, at which point I had to say something. Now, I'm not seriously comparing the bungled launch of a corporate website to the world's worst nuclear disaster, but I kind of am. Nor am I comparing myself to such a heroic personage as Valery Legasov, but I sort of am. The scale of our website disaster is completely dwarfed by that of Chernobyl, but the hive mind that lies behind it is the same. And the perhaps foolhardy points of conjecture I raised once our change officers were done congratulating everyone, not least themselves, on a job well done, pale in comparison to the gallant stand Valery Legasov took when he spilled the beans on the Chernobyl debacle, potentially precipitating, as Gorbachev himself claimed, the very fall of the Soviet Union itself. But my conviction in doing so, indeed at the potential cost to my career advancement, is the same as Legasov's, and my underlying question is the same. What is the cost of lies? Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth, and whether that lie be a relatively small one, such as the new website is fantastic, or a monumental falsehood such as there is no graphite on the roof, the end result is the same. Everything gets worse. And it is not just that everything erodes, but also that it reinforces a culture of unaccountability. For how can ultimate accountability exist if ultimate human authority is infallible? And in such a utopia, blame can only ever move in a downward direction, never upwards. As such, Legasov laments, what else is left but to abandon even the hope of truth and content ourselves instead with stories? In these stories, it doesn't matter who the heroes are, all we want to know is who is to blame. I'm guessing I made very few new friends and even lost some old ones when I pointed out the glaringly obvious failures of our ridiculous new website. A project that had been sidelined and procrastinated upon and passed about like a hot potato for so many years that someone high up the chain finally just said to someone not quite so high up the chain, "Get it done." That person then said to someone below them, "Get it done." And so on it went, until me and a few other unfortunates were compelled to pull this thing together on the smell of an oily rag. And indeed, now that the thing has blown up in our faces, just as Chernobyl did, those at the top who bungled it from the start are looking for someone to blame. The good news is, we are not living in a communist dystopia. Not quite yet. There are still a few good men left in the building. My boss and a handful of other key mid-level functionaries without whom our organisation could not operate also had the stones to come forward and state that this project was a disaster from the start, though perhaps not as frankly as I myself expressed it, and as such my position, if not my bureaucratic salience within the company, has been grudgingly endorsed by the larger group. But I say again, what is the cost of lies? What if, instead of dumping millions of dollars into frivolous net zero and DEI initiatives, my company had used that money to properly resource our new website? What is the cost of the lie that purports that pointless greenwashing and diversity boondoggles outweigh the benefits of a properly functional website? The cost as I see it is 1. Lower SEO rankings, leading to 2. Fewer sales, 3. Less brand recognition, 4. Poorer quality applicants, in turn leading to 5. A continuation of the same downward spiral we already find ourselves in. When I joined this company, it was a thriving and familial place, where dissent was encouraged and even rewarded. Since then, I've seen that culture gradually replaced with the glassy-eyed, big brother worshipping hive mind of the new woke order. Looking further afield though, what is the cost of these lies when we extrapolate them on a global scale? What is the cost of the lie that purports that women can have high-powered masculine-style careers and be mothers at the same time? The breakdown of traditional families and fewer children. What is the cost of the lie that purports that people can change their sex on a whim? A growing contagion of deranged and barren humans, again leading to the breakdown of traditional families and fewer children. What is the cost of the lie that purports that taking out $100,000 or more of debt before the age of 25 to fund a worthless college degree is the only worthwhile life strategy? Generation upon generation of impoverished slaves, again leading to the breakdown of traditional families and fewer children. What is the cost of the lie that purports that humans must flagrantly discontinue fossil fuel usage by 2030 to avoid a flaming Armageddon? I'll not even repeat the previous refrain here, although it still stands, and I'll simply say mass extinction. To quote the more extreme of my many contemporaries, they hate us and they want to kill us. What is the cost of lies? The cost, of course, as Valery Legasov said, is that if we hear enough lies, then we no longer recognize the truth at all. At this point, our agency as rational individuals vanishes. Our critical thinking evaporates. The cost is that those who hold the levers of power continually tighten their grip. The cost is that we march blindly into whatever reincarnation of Solzhenitsyn's gulag that awaits us. The cost is not even our freedom and the discontinuation of our progeny, but our very souls themselves. I'm not a hero, but I will not sit idly by and allow lies to be perpetrated, even over something as banal and seemingly inconsequential as a corporate website. I will, as best I'm able, call out the lies as and when I hear them, no matter how minuscule or how outrageous. Because this is the only path to freedom, to integrity, and indeed to God. The lies that led to the failure of our corporate website are not comparable to the great lies that caused the explosion of Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But the lies that first started the chain reaction that led to that explosion are the very same. Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth, and small lies turn into big lies, and those big lies eventually become grotesque falsehoods which have the potential to destroy not only countless human lives, but civilization itself. It is incumbent on we, the few good men and women left in the building, to ask ourselves each time we hear one, what is the cost of lies? Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. Please also subscribe to my Substack at jjdawson.substack.com. And if you'd like to keep in touch, please do follow me on X at RealJJDawson. You can also follow me on Getter, Gab and Minds. And of course, if you enjoyed this, please do give it a like and share it about, because it really helps me out.